The silence hit first. Before the overturned furniture, before the scattered papers, before the violation arranged itself into recognizable shapes, there was the silence. That heavy, unnatural quiet that wraps around you like a burial shroud, whispering that something has been stolen that can't be replaced. I stood in my doorway, keys still in hand, and let it wash over me. 3 days at a corporate retreat learning to trust my colleagues through trust falls and rope courses, and sharing circles where we revealed childhood fears to people we barely knew. 3 days of professional development mandated by the court administration office where I worked as a stenographer, where I spent my days capturing every word of testimony with mechanical precision while my mind cataloged the tells of deception. The hesitation, the vocal shift, the carefully constructed phrase that revealed more than it concealed. 3 days away from this house, from this life, from the careful balance I'd constructed between my husband's family and my own sanity. The silence told me the balance had shattered while I was gone. I stepped inside. My shoes crunched on something, photograph glass, I realized, from the frame that had held my grandmother's wedding picture. The one where she looked directly at the camera with the expression I'd spent my life trying to understand. Not happiness exactly, not defiance, something more complicated, something that said, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm doing it anyway. The living room looked like a search, not a burglary. Drawers pulled out and emptied with methodical precision. Couch cushions slashed open not in rage but in systematic examination. The floor lamp I'd bought at a flea market, the one Ryan always hated, stood untouched in the corner. The television remained. The silverware in the dining room hutch sat undisturbed. They hadn't been looking for money or jewelry, they'd been looking for something specific, something only I would know to hide. My fingers found my phone without conscious instruction. The screen lit up my face in the dim room. I'd left the curtains drawn exactly as I'd left them, and now I couldn't bring myself to open them. Couldn't bear to let the ordinary afternoon light witness this. Ryan's number, 1 ring, 2 rings, the familiar click of voicemail, of course. My dear husband was probably at his mother's house, pretending not to know why his wife was calling. Practicing his surprised expression, his concerned tone, his "Audrey, are you okay?" that would sound almost genuine because he'd rehearsed it, because he'd learned from the best how to perform sincerity. I spoke to the recording. Ryan. Someone broke into the house. The safe is open. Call me back immediately. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Too controlled, too precise, like the court transcripts I produced daily, every word captured, every hesitation noted, every lie preserved in permanent record. I'd spent 8 years learning to document other people's deceptions. Now I was listening to my own. I walked through the debris of my violated home, cataloging the damage with the professional detachment that had become my survival mechanism. Photo frames face down. The drawer from my grandmother's antique desk, the one she'd used to write her letters, now pulled completely free and upended. The rug in the study rolled back to expose the floorboards beneath. But it was the basement door that stopped me, standing open. The darkness beyond absolute. I hadn't checked down there yet. The basement light flickered on, revealing more chaos, boxes overturned, holiday decorations scattered, the old filing cabinet where I kept tax records pulled open and rifled through. But something caught my eye, a small piece of paper trapped under a fallen box of winter clothes. I pulled it free. A receipt from Henderson Hardware dated 3 days ago. Item, duplicate key. Quantity 1 paid in cash. My phone buzzed against my palm, Ryan's name on the screen. Where are you? Silence on his end, then at Mom's. Listen, Audrey, I can explain. The words came out rehearsed. I'd heard that tone before, the careful modulation of a man who'd spent hours preparing his defense. In my work, I transcribed thousands of hours of testimony. I knew the sound of practiced deception better than I knew my own breathing. Did you give her a key? Silence stretched between us like wire. Then she said she just wanted to look for some old family photos while you were away. I didn't think. You never do think when it comes to her, do you? I crushed the receipt in my fist, feeling the paper compress into something dense and weapon-like. Those letters were all I had left of my grandmother, Ryan, the only things that were truly mine. We can talk about this when I get home. No, the word came out sharp enough to cut. I'd spent 3 years sharpening it against the whetstone of his mother's disapproval, his sister's interference, his own refusal to see what was happening in front of him. We'll talk about this in front of everyone. I'm coming over there right now, and Ryan, tell your mother to prepare for war. I ended the call and stood in my destroyed basement, surrounded by the wreckage of trust. They thought they could break me. Make me submit to their control like everyone else in their lives. The daughter-in-law who would inherit my grandmother's stubbornness instead of her property. The wife who wouldn't bow to Helen Miller's vision of family hierarchy. But they had no idea what they'd just started. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who strikes first, it's the one who knows how to document everything, how to wait, how to strike back with the precision of someone who has spent her professional life capturing every word, every hesitation, every lie. Helen Miller's pristine living room made my skin crawl, everything perfectly arranged. Not a cushion out of place while my house lay in ruins across town. The family photos on her walls told their own story, Ryan and Chloe's childhood moments carefully curated to show Helen's version of reality. Ryan's law school graduation, Chloe's debutante ball, their father's funeral, Helen in black looking appropriately grief-stricken, not a single picture of my wedding day among them. I'd noticed this 3 years ago, standing in the same room in my wedding dress, waiting for Ryan to finish some crisis his mother had manufactured. I'd noticed, and I'd told myself it didn't matter. That we would build our own history, our own family, our own photographs. I was 26 and stupid with love. Now I was 29 and educated in the precise mechanics of disappointment. I have no idea what you're talking about. Helen's voice dripped honey-sweet poison as she poured tea into delicate cups. Royal Albert, I noted automatically. The pattern she'd registered for when she married, the one she'd kept perfect for 40 years while marriages crumbled and children grew into strangers. Ryan gave me permission to look for some old family albums while you were away, nothing more. Chloe sat beside her mother, arms crossed, wedding ring conspicuously absent since her divorce 6 months ago. She'd moved back into this house, I'd learned. Back into the room she'd occupied as a teenager, letting her mother manage her life while she plotted interference in mine. You're being hysterical, Audrey. As usual, I placed the hardware store receipt on the coffee table. The paper had smoothed out in my pocket, the date and time still clear. Tuesday, 10:47 a.m., 3 days ago. While I was learning to trust my colleagues through mandatory team-building exercises. Funny how you needed a new key made 3 days ago. Planning ahead? Ryan shifted in his seat, eyes darting between his mother and me. The leather couch creaked under him, the same couch where I'd sat for 3 years of holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, Sunday afternoons that felt like endurance tests. Maybe we should all calm down. Oh, we're very calm. I watched Helen's perfectly manicured fingers tighten around her teacup, just like we were calm last Christmas when you went through my phone while I was sleeping. Or last month when you showed up unannounced at my office to check on me. I worry about my son. Helen set the cup down with precise control. Someone needs to look out for his interests. His interests. Or yours. My laugh felt like broken glass in my throat. I thought of the ledger I'd kept for 3 years. Not a physical book, I'd learned not to leave evidence where Helen could find it. A mental accounting of every intrusion, every manipulation, every moment Ryan had chosen her comfort over my boundaries. The ledger was long, and I was done adding entries. Mother was right about you from the start. Chloe leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the particular satisfaction of someone who had failed at marriage and wanted company in her misery. You never understood our family. Always keeping secrets, hiding things in that safe of yours. Those letters belonged to my grandmother. I kept my voice level the way I did when transcribing hostile witness testimony. Letters that prove your family cheated ours 60 years ago, some real estate dispute you won't let die. Helen's mask cracked. Just for a moment, the tightening of her jaw, the flare of her nostrils, the controlled fury of a woman who had spent decades polishing her image and resented any reminder of its foundation. That property should have been ours. Your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she, Mother. Ryan's warning came too late. I stood slowly, pieces clicking into place with the satisfaction of a stenographer who had finally caught the witness in a contradiction. So you admit you took them? Helen's face smoothed over instantly, the recovery of a professional liar. I admitted nothing and you have no proof? You're right. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the record button I'd activated the moment I entered the room. But I will. I turned to Ryan. Are you coming home or staying here? He looked at his mother, then at me, always torn. Always choosing the path of least resistance, the option that required him to disappoint someone he could apologize to later. I think maybe we all need space to cool off. Wrong answer. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at Helen. You know what's funny? Those letters you stole, they're not even the originals, just copies I kept as decoys. Grandmother taught me well, always keep what matters most where manipulative people can't reach it. Helen's teacup clattered against its saucer, the first uncontrolled sound I'd ever heard from her. You're lying. Am I? Guess you'll have to wonder about that, along with what else I might have hidden away. I met Ryan's eyes. Don't bother coming home tonight or maybe ever. Audrey, wait. He started to rise, but Chloe grabbed his arm. Let her go. She's just trying to manipulate you like always. I closed the door on Helen's perfectly ordered world and walked to my car. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, but not from fear. From the certainty that this had only begun. The originals were safe, just as I'd said. Locked away in a safety deposit box at First National since the day I married Ryan and saw the hunger in Helen's eyes when my grandmother's letters were mentioned at the wedding. I'd been 26, stupid with love, but not completely stupid. Something in Helen's expression, a tightening around the mouth, a calculation in the eyes, had triggered the professional instinct I'd spent 4 years in court reporting school developing. The instinct to document, to preserve, to protect the record. My grandmother had raised me after my parents died. She'd been a court stenographer too before the arthritis took her hands. She'd taught me the profession, the discipline, the importance of capturing every word because words were the only weapons that lasted. She'd also taught me about the Millers. Don't trust that family, she'd said 3 weeks before my wedding when I showed her the invitation with Helen's name in elegant script. Your grandfather and I had business with them once. They take what isn't theirs, then convince everyone it was theirs all along. I dismissed it as old grudge, generational bitterness, the kind of thing that faded when love entered the picture. Now, sitting in my car outside the house that had been my prison dressed as a home, I understood she'd been trying to warn me. Not about property disputes or ancient fraud. About the nature of people who could only feel secure when others were diminished. My phone buzzed, Evan. I answered, how bad was it? They took the bait, Helen practically confessed. I started the engine, watching Helen's house in the rearview mirror, the lights in the upstairs window, Chloe's room, probably, where she was complaining about me to her mother, where they were planning their next move. But I need your help with something else. Name it. Remember that security system you installed at your lake house, the one with the hidden cameras? Yeah, why? Because I'm done playing defense, they want to go through my things. Let's make sure we catch them in the act next time. I pulled away from the curb, watching the house shrink in the mirror. And Evan, thank you for being the one person in my life who actually listens. Always. But Audrey, just be careful, people like that, they're most dangerous when they're cornered. I ended the call, mind already racing with plans. Helen thought she knew everything about me. Had me all figured out, the difficult daughter-in-law, the paranoid wife, the obstacle to her control over Ryan. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd spent 3 years watching her manipulate everyone around her. I'd documented every technique, every strategy, every move in her playbook. I'd learned from the best. And now it was time to put those lessons to use. The coffee shop across from Helen's favorite salon wasn't my usual spot, but it gave me a perfect view of the entrance through floor-to-ceiling windows that needed cleaning. I'd been watching for 2 hours when Evan slid into the seat across from me, pushing a fresh cup toward my hands. Black, no sugar, exactly how I took it. He'd remembered from the dozen times we'd grabbed coffee after installing the security system at his lake house, back when I'd thought I was just being cautious about a vacation property. The cameras were set up, he said. Motion sensors, night vision, everything feeding directly to my phone. Professional grade, the kind he installed for clients who owned valuable art or had security concerns. But are you sure about this? I nodded toward the salon window where Helen and Chloe sat in adjacent chairs, getting their weekly manicures. Helen's was French tips, always French tips, the classic style that never went out of fashion. Chloe's changed weekly, today was some metallic shade that caught the light like a warning. I pressed play on my phone. Their voices came through clear, captured by the bug I'd planted in Helen's purse during our confrontation. A small device, voice-activated, legal to own and use in Connecticut as long as one party to the conversation knew about it. I'd known that was enough. We need those original letters, Helen was saying. That safety deposit box has to be at her bank downtown. Ryan says she's been going through their financial records, Chloe replied, probably planning to divorce him and take everything. Over my dead body. I didn't spend 30 years building this family's reputation to have her destroy it. We're going back to the house tomorrow while she's at work. There has to be something we can use against her. I stopped the recording. Still think I'm paranoid? Evan's face hardened. We should take this to the police. And tell them what? That my mother-in-law is planning to rob me? They'll say it's a family matter. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. The coffee was too hot, burning slightly, but I welcomed the sensation. Something real, something immediate in a day that felt increasingly surreal. Besides, I want more than just stopping them. I want them to face consequences. For once in their privileged lives. My phone buzzed, Ryan calling again, 3rd time today. I declined it. He's been sleeping at their house, I told Evan, probably plotting with them. Trying to figure out where the originals are. Or maybe he's worried about you. Then he should have worried before giving them a key to our house. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I thought of the receipt again. 3 days ago, while I was learning to trust strangers through mandatory exercises, my husband was at a hardware store buying the tool of my violation. A text from Ryan, please come home. We need to talk. Home, I muttered. Like that word meant anything anymore, Evan leaned forward. Audrey, I know you're hurt, but the salon door chimed. Helen and Chloe emerged, fresh manicures gleaming in the October sun. They headed toward Helen's Mercedes, but Helen paused, looked directly at the coffee shop window. She knew I was watching. Her lips curved into that knowing smile I'd learned to hate. The smile that said, I see you, I've always seen you. And you're not as clever as you think. Time to go, I said, standing abruptly. They'll be at my house tomorrow at 10, I told Evan as we moved toward the exit. According to their schedule, that's when I have my weekly deposition downtown. They think I'll be gone for 3 hours. And will you? I'll be in the parking lot across the street, watching. We reached his truck. I turned to face him, hands still shaking slightly despite my control. I thought I wanted to handle this myself. I do. I took a breath. But I can't face them alone anymore. I need someone in my corner. He touched my arm gently. Always, just promise me something. What? Don't let revenge consume you. I've seen what it does to people. I watched Helen's car pull away, remembering the day she'd first shown her true colors. Our wedding reception, when she'd cornered me in the bathroom of the venue she'd insisted on choosing. You'll never be good enough for this family, she'd said, lipstick perfect, perfume expensive. But don't worry. One day Ryan will realize that, and I'll be waiting. This isn't about revenge, I told Evan, but even as I said it, I wondered if I was lying. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my blood freeze. Found something interesting in your grandmother's old law firm records. Tomorrow noon, Riverside Park. Come alone or Ryan learns everything about the Anderson case. Evan noticed my expression. What's wrong? I closed the message, mind racing. The Anderson case. My grandmother's biggest regret. The secret she'd taken to her grave. The real reason Helen hated our family with the particular fury of someone who believed themselves wronged. Nothing, I lied, forcing a smile. Work stuff, I should go prepare for tomorrow. But as I walked to my car, Helen's words from 3 years ago echoed in my head. One day Ryan will realize maybe she was right. Maybe tomorrow he would, and maybe it was time he did. Riverside Park looked different at noon. Colder somehow, the autumn light sharp against the bare trees, the river moving fast with recent rain. I sat on a bench near the water, clutching a manila envelope. Ammunition for whatever game Helen was playing. Inside were copies of the Anderson case files, my grandmother's notes, her observations about the Miller family's conduct during the 1989 real estate dispute, her suspicions about document forgery that she'd never been able to prove. I'd found them in her papers after she died. Hadn't understood their significance until after I married Ryan, when Helen's hostility began to make sense. A shadow fell across my lap. Not Helen, Ryan, my voice cracked. What are you doing here? Mother told me everything. He sat beside me, leaving careful space between us. The space of estrangement, of marriage's ending, of people who no longer knew how to touch each other. About the Anderson case, about what your grandmother did to our family. The envelope felt heavier. Did she tell you how your grandfather tried to blackmail mine, how he threatened to destroy their law firm unless they gave him that property? That's not, he stopped, rubbing his face. The gesture I'd once found endearing, now just tired. A man caught between two versions of history, unable to commit to either. She said you'd try to twist things, like she twisted you. I turned to face him. When did you give her the safe combination, Ryan? His silence was answer enough. The day after our wedding, I continued. When she convinced you I was hiding something, that's why you've been checking our bank statements, right? Looking for evidence I'm stealing from you? I was protecting our family. Our family? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my voice. There is no our family, there's only ever been yours. My phone buzzed. Evan, texting about the cameras, everything was ready for tomorrow's trap, but suddenly it all felt hollow. She's using you, I said softly. She always has, and you let her because it's easier than standing up to her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I stood, dropping the envelope in his lap. Here, the precious Anderson case files. Proof that your grandfather was the one who committed fraud, not mine. Proof that your mother's been lying all these years. He stared at the envelope. How did you get them? From my grandmother's old law partner. Turns out he's been waiting years for someone to finally expose the truth. I stepped back. But you know what? Keep them, burn them, give them to Helen. I don't care anymore. Audrey, wait. I filed for divorce yesterday. The words hung between us like shattered glass. Ryan's face went pale. You what? Check your email. The papers should arrive today. My hands were steady now. The steadiness of someone who had finally made the only decision that remained. I'm done being the villain in Helen's story, done watching you choose them over me, done pretending we have a marriage worth saving. He stood, reaching for me. We can fix this, I'll talk to Mother. That's exactly the problem. I moved away from his touch. Your first instinct is still to run to her, it always will be. My phone buzzed again. Helen, this time, where are you? We had a deal. I typed back, deals changed, ask Ryan about the files. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage, Ryan said. You already did that when you gave them the key to our house. I started walking away, then paused. You know what the saddest part is? I actually thought I could save you from them, but you don't want to be saved. Audrey, goodbye, Ryan. I walked through the park, past the spot where he'd proposed, past the bench where we used to have Sunday picnics before Helen decided those took him away from family obligations. My phone kept buzzing. Helen, Ryan, even Chloe, I silenced them all. Only Evan's message got through. Cameras are live. You still want to go through with tomorrow's plan? I stopped at the park exit, looking back one last time. Ryan stood where I'd left him, envelope clutched in his hands, looking lost. For a moment my resolve wavered, then I remembered the ransacked house, the violated safe. 3 years of subtle manipulation and gaslighting that I documented in my mental ledger until the weight became unbearable. Yes, I texted back, but change of plans. I don't just want to catch them in the act anymore. What do you want? I watched Ryan pull out his phone, probably calling Helen, always running back to mother. I want to destroy them, I typed, all of them. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to burn everything to the ground and start over. The security camera feed flickered on my laptop screen as I sat in my car across the street. 10 minutes until Helen's usual Thursday morning intrusion. Evan's sophisticated setup captured every angle of my house, front door, back entrance, even the garden path Helen loved to criticize for its lack of proper landscaping. The cameras were motion-activated, night vision capable, feeding directly to a cloud server with encryption Evan assured me was military grade. You don't have to watch this, Evan said from the passenger seat. We were parked at the end of the block, far enough to avoid notice, close enough to intervene if necessary. We can just let the cameras record. I need to see it. My knuckles whitened around my coffee cup. The same cup from yesterday, refilled, cold now. I needed to see them enter. Needed to know exactly how they did it, how they moved through my space, how they justified their violation to themselves. Right on schedule, Helen's Mercedes glided to a stop. She stepped out perfectly coiffed as always, followed by Chloe. But then a third door opened. Ryan, the coffee cup crumpled in my grip. He's helping them. They approached the front door, Ryan glancing nervously over his shoulder, the gesture of a man who knew he was doing wrong but couldn't stop himself. Helen said something, gesturing impatiently. He pulled out a key, not the copy from the hardware store, but his original, the one I'd given him when we married, when I believed in sharing everything. Jesus, Evan muttered. Audrey, maybe we should. I grabbed his arm as a fourth figure emerged from Helen's car. A man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. He walked with authority, the stride of someone accustomed to being listened to. He looked familiar somehow, though I couldn't place him immediately. Who is that? That's James Morton, Evan said slowly. Helen's lawyer, I've seen him at charity events. The Millers donate to every cause in town. The group disappeared inside my house. I switched between camera views, watching them move through rooms with disturbing familiarity. Helen directed them like a general commanding troops, pointing, gesturing, her voice clear through the hidden microphones Evan had installed. The study, she was saying, those Anderson files have to be here somewhere. Mother, she said she gave them to me. Ryan's protest sounded weak, even through digital compression. Copies, obviously. You think your wife would give up her only leverage? Search everything. I watched them tear through my home again, but this time was different. This time I saw Ryan's hands shaking as he opened drawers. Saw Chloe's satisfied smirk as she knocked books off shelves. Saw Helen's mask slip when she thought no one was watching, revealing raw desperation beneath the polished surface. The safe, Morton said suddenly. Did you check behind it? My breath caught. The wall safe had been a decoy. Everyone knew about it, I'd made sure of that, complaining loudly about its inconvenience, its small size, its location in the study where anyone could see. But behind it, installed by the previous owner and never removed, was a hidden compartment. Inside were documents far more damaging than the Anderson case. Evidence of Helen's own financial misconduct, carefully gathered over 3 years of watching and waiting. Bank statements she'd left visible during her visits. Emails she'd pulled up on my computer when I stepped away. Conversations she'd had on her phone, loud enough to be overheard, confident in my apparent obliviousness. There's nothing back there, Ryan said quickly, too quickly. Helen's eyes narrowed. Move it. Mother, move it. I grabbed my phone, fingers hovering over 911. Behind that safe was the final piece. The documentation of Helen's embezzlement from her own charitable foundation, the Children's Education Fund, the board of which she chaired with impeccable social credentials. 3 years of diverted donations, falsified records, money flowing into private accounts that funded the lifestyle she couldn't afford on her late husband's insurance and investments. Ryan stepped forward, then stopped. No, what did you say? Helen turned on him, her calm cracking like ice under pressure. No, his voice strengthened, the first time I'd heard that tone in 3 years. This ends now. We're leaving? After everything I've done for you? Helen's composure shattered completely. That woman has poisoned you against your own family. That woman is my wife, not anymore. Morton interrupted smoothly, the voice of legal authority. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. You have no legal right to prevent us from what? I stepped into the doorway, phone recording everything. Breaking and entering, destruction of property. Conspiracy, they froze like guilty children, except Helen, she smiled, that knowing smile, perfect even in disaster. Perfect timing, dear, we were just discussing the Anderson case. And other family matters. I can see that. I moved further into the room, Evan close behind me. But you made one mistake, Helen, you got sloppy, desperate. I don't know what you mean. The Anderson case was never about property fraud, was it? It was about covering up what really happened, what you did. Her smile slipped. You're confused. The real documents aren't behind that safe, they're already with the district attorney. Along with proof that your mother embezzled millions from her own charity foundation. The room erupted in chaos. Helen lunged for her lawyer. Chloe started screaming about family loyalty and betrayal. Ryan stood frozen between them all, looking like a man who had finally seen the machinery he'd been part of. But I kept my eyes on Helen, watching her perfect world crumble in real time. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone, sometimes it's about letting them destroy themselves. And sometimes justice comes from simply telling the truth. The police lights painted my living room in alternating red and blue. Helen sat primly on the couch, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she spoke to the officers in the voice of wounded dignity. "I was just trying to protect my son," she sobbed, pointing at me. From her, I watched 3 years of careful planning crumble in the face of her performance. Mrs. Miller was threatening our family, Morton added smoothly, producing documents from his briefcase. "We have evidence of her harassment, her obsession with destroying her mother-in-law's reputation." The break-in was merely an attempt to recover documents that rightfully belonged to the family. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. The recording of their intrusion, their conspiracy, their admission, now useless in the face of Helen's practiced victimhood. They'd gotten ahead of me, turned it all around, just like Helen always did. "That's not true," Ryan's voice cut through the room, all eyes turned to him. "Mother, stop, just stop." Helen's tears vanished instantly. "Ryan, dear, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." He stepped away from her toward me. But I backed away too little too late. "The embezzlement accusations, they're true, aren't they? That's why you've been so desperate to destroy Audrey's family reputation. To cover your tracks. Everything I did was for this family." Helen's mask shattered completely. "That money secured your future, your sister's future, and she jabbed a finger at me, threatened to ruin everything." The officers exchanged glances. One spoke into his radio. "Mrs. Helen Miller, we're going to need you to come down to the station. This is absurd, I'm the victim here." She turned to her lawyer. "Morton, do something." But Morton was already edging toward the door. "I think our professional relationship has concluded, Helen, given the circumstances." Everything happened quickly after that, Helen screaming as they led her away, Chloe following, wailing about family loyalty. Morton slipping out during the chaos. The evidence I'd gathered being collected, documented, tagged for future proceedings. Ryan stayed. "Audrey," he started, "don't." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm room. "Just don't. I didn't know about the charity money, about any of it, I swear. But you knew about the break-ins, the harassment, the lies." My voice cracked. "You chose them. Every single time you chose them. I can fix this." "Fix what?" I gestured at our destroyed home, the police tape, the scattered remnants of a life together. "My grandmother's letters are still gone. Our marriage is over. Your mother's going to prison. What exactly can you fix?" Evan appeared in the doorway. "Audrey, the detective needs your statement." I moved to follow him, but Ryan caught my arm. "I love you," he said desperately. "Isn't that worth something?" I looked at his hand on my arm. Remembered every touch, every promise, every moment I'd thought we were building something real. Then I remembered watching him help them break into our home. Watching him choose his mother's lies over my truth one last time. "Love without trust isn't love," I said quietly. "It's just another form of control." I pulled away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of our life together. The courthouse hallway stretched endless and cold. I sat on a hard wooden bench, waiting for Helen's arraignment, watching her society friends whisper among themselves as they pretended not to stare. 3 weeks since the break-in, and still they couldn't quite believe their charitable board president was facing embezzlement charges. Their disbelief was almost funny. I'd believed in Helen Miller for 3 years, despite every warning sign, every subtle cruelty, every documented manipulation. If I could be fooled, anyone could. Ryan appeared at the end of the hall, dark circles under his eyes. Chloe clung to his arm, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. I focused on my phone, pretending to read emails I couldn't concentrate on. "Audrey?" His voice was closer than I expected. I looked up to find him sitting beside me, leaving the careful space of estrangement. Chloe hovered, unwilling to leave her brother alone with me but uncertain how to intervene. "The divorce papers are with your lawyer," I said without looking up. "Just sign them." "That's not," he stopped, started again. "Mother wants to make a deal." Now I looked at him. "A deal?" "She'll return your grandmother's letters, all of them. If you drop the charges." A laugh bubbled up, bitter as the coffee I'd drunk cold in my car during surveillance. "And you think I should? She's still my mother, and that's all that matters, right?" I stood, needing distance from the smell of his cologne, the familiarity of his posture, the ghost of love that still haunted the space between us. Even after everything she did, everything she stole, she made mistakes. "Mistakes?" my voice carried, making heads turn. "She systematically destroyed our marriage, terrorized me in my own home, stole millions from her own charity." "Those aren't mistakes, Ryan, they're choices." Helen's lawyer appeared beckoning to Ryan, but before he could move, the courthouse doors burst open. Evan rushed in, clutching a manila envelope. "Got it," he said, breathing hard. "Found it in Morton's office." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single document, a letter from Helen to her lawyer dated 3 years ago, the day before my wedding. "What is that?" Ryan asked. "Insurance," I said, scanning the contents. "In case I ever threatened her control over you." I looked up as Helen entered in handcuffs, flanked by officers. She saw the letter in my hands, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "Your lawyer isn't as loyal as you thought." I held up the letter. "You documented everything, Helen, every step of your plan to destroy me. And now everyone's going to know exactly who you are." "You ungrateful little," she lunged forward, but the officers held her back. "Mother, stop." Ryan moved between us. "Just stop." Helen's face crumpled. "Everything I did was for you, to protect you from her." "From what?" Ryan's voice cracked. "From being happy, from having a life outside your control?" "No," I interrupted. "I loved him enough to let him choose." "You loved him enough to make sure he never could." The whispers around us grew louder. Helen's friends watched in horror as their perfect society matron shattered before their eyes. Chloe backed away from her mother, finally seeing the truth she'd helped enable. "The arraignment's starting," Evan said softly. I handed the letter to the district attorney, who'd been waiting quietly nearby. Then I turned to Ryan one last time. "I did love you," I said, "but love shouldn't hurt like this." "Audrey, please." "Goodbye, Ryan." I walked away as Helen was led into the courtroom, her carefully constructed world collapsing behind her. Outside, the autumn air felt clean and sharp. Evan caught up with me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. "You okay?" I watched leaves scatter across the pavement, breaking free from their branches, carried away by the wind. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." My phone buzzed. A text from my grandmother's old law partner. "Found something in the archives. Your grandmother would be proud." I looked up at the courthouse, the building where I'd spent 8 years documenting other people's deceptions. Where I'd learned that truth, properly recorded, was the only weapon that lasted. "Sometimes winning isn't about destroying your enemies," I told Evan. "Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you." He walked with me to the parking lot, neither of us speaking. The silence between us was different from the silence that had hit me 3 weeks ago in my doorway. This was the silence of aftermath, of reckoning, of beginning. "Evan, yeah, thank you for being in my corner. Always." He paused. "But just so you know, I'm not going anywhere, even when you don't need backup anymore." I looked at him, really looked for the first time. The steadiness that had made him perfect as witness and ally. The patience that had never rushed my decisions. The respect that had never tried to replace my judgment with his own. "I know," I said, and I did. The last box from my old life sat unopened on my new apartment floor. Through the window, downtown lights glittered like scattered stars against the November dark. So different from the suburban darkness I'd left behind, the quiet streets, the watchful houses, the constant awareness of being observed by neighbors who reported to Helen. My phone lit up. Evan's text about Helen's sentencing, 5 years for embezzlement. The society pages were already buzzing with scandal. Her carefully crafted reputation shattered like the teacup she'd dropped in my living room, the one uncontrolled moment in 40 years of performance. A knock at the door made me freeze. I knew that pattern, 3 quick taps, 1 slow. Ryan's signature, developed in our first apartment when he'd worked late and didn't want to wake the neighbors. I considered not answering. Considered letting him stand in the hallway with whatever peace offering he'd brought, whatever explanation he'd rehearsed, whatever hope he still harbored that we could reconstruct what his mother had destroyed. But I was done hiding. Done letting Helen's family dictate the terms of my existence, even now, even from prison. I opened the door. Ryan stood in the hallway holding a familiar leather-bound bundle, my grandmother's letters. "I found them," he said. "In Mother's study while cleaning out the house." I took the bundle, fingers tracing the worn edges. The paper was soft with age, the ribbon that held them together faded to the color of old roses. I'd know these letters anywhere. Had memorized them in the years after my grandmother's death when they were all I had left of her voice. "They were always yours," Ryan said. I looked up at him. At the man I'd married, the man I'd tried to save, the man who had chosen his mother's lies over my truth until the moment when truth became unavoidable. "How is she?" "Angry, bitter." He shrugged, the gesture of a man who had finally accepted the limits of his power. "Claims she's in therapy, says she's starting to understand some things about our family. And you? Learning to stand on my own." He glanced past me into the apartment. An easel stood by the window, canvas half covered in bold strokes of red and gold. Something I discovered by accident in the weeks after the break-in, when sleep wouldn't come and silence felt too heavy. A way to pour out everything words couldn't express. "It helps," I said simply. "Audrey, I don't." I stepped back, creating distance. "We both know why it ended." "I know, I just." He pulled out an envelope, the signed divorce papers and something else. "You should see this." Inside was a newspaper clipping from 30 years ago, a small article about a young Helen Miller before she married into money, desperately trying to prove herself worthy of high society. A photograph showed her at a charity event, standing at the edge of the frame, looking at the camera with an expression I recognized. Hunger, fear, the desperate calculation of someone who believed herself to be one mistake away from losing everything. She was always afraid, Ryan said quietly, of losing control, of being exposed as not good enough. I'm not excusing what she did, but I understand it now. Understanding doesn't make it right. No. But it helps me not become her. A siren wailed somewhere in the city below. In my old life, I would have flinched at the noise, imagined Helen's commentary about that kind of neighborhood. Now it felt like a reminder. Life goes on. Changes, transforms. I never wanted revenge, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just wanted to be free. I know that's why you won. He turned to leave, then paused. Looked at the painting, the apartment, the life I was building without him or his family. It's beautiful, he said. You're beautiful. After he left, I opened the bundle of letters. My grandmother's words flowed across the pages, telling stories of strength, of standing up to bullies, of choosing integrity over revenge. But one passage caught my eye, written just before she died. Remember, dear heart. Some people will try to dim your light because they fear their own darkness. Your power lies not in fighting them, but in continuing to shine. I picked up my brush, adding touches of blue to the canvas. The city lights flickered outside, casting shadows that danced across my work. Not everything needed resolution. Not every story needed a neat ending. Sometimes victory wasn't in destroying your enemies or even forgiving them. Sometimes it was in discovering who you really were without them. My phone buzzed again. Evan inviting me to dinner, not a date, not yet, but maybe someday. For now, friendship was enough. For now, I had my freedom, my truth, my art. The night was young, the canvas was waiting. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free. Not because I'd won, not because Helen lost, but because I'd finally learned the difference between revenge and liberation. And in that difference, I found myself.